Hi everyone, it's Neil Reynolds here from the Worship Foundation, and this is our third video in the series Worship Without Singing. And I'm sure if you're like me, you've been watching the various statistics that have been coming across our screens every day as the pandemic has progressed. And maybe by now we're becoming a little desensitized to them. But the reality of the situation, this is still a time of deeply painful loss for many, many people. Deeply painful loss. And behind every statistic is a life that has been radically altered. Children have lost parents and grandparents. Brothers have lost brothers. Sisters have lost sisters. And many within the medical professions will have seen countless people suffer and die in their hospital beds without being surrounded by their loved ones. So it's almost impossible to imagine how this hasn't resulted in the human race collectively accumulating a huge amount of grief. And it seems to me that Christians are no less likely to have been affected in all of this than those without faith, despite all of our ideas and words and prayers and expectations of healing and miracles. In fact, I think this whole pandemic has forced us to think again carefully about how we understand and talk about healing in the church. And that's no bad thing. I think all too often the kingdom of God is viewed almost exclusively through the lens of healing and miracles. And this needs to change. But of course, it's not just the issue of healing. People have experienced loss in many other ways. So when we meet in much lower numbers in our buildings, spaces in the seats around us will only emphasize the spaces in our lives right now. Not only people who have died, but jobs that have been lost, dreams that have been broken, careers and relationships that are on hold. So I think when we do start to gather again, we will be standing in solidarity with fellow human beings everywhere at a time of shared need, shared loss, shared grief. And it seems to me when we do, we won't have the answers. Which really is the essence of this thing we call lament. As someone once said, lament starts when we ask the question why, and we don't get the answer. In fact, I suspect that many of us are well versed with the idea of lament now. We know the theology, we've studied the Psalms, we've read the books and listened to the talks. And as the worship community, us worship leaders and songwriters, over recent years we've been talking how it's been missing from the church and how we should write more songs about lament. In fact, many people have written about all of this very, very well, and I don't feel the need to add to all of that. My question here is different. Despite all that understanding, will we actually lament in the church in the coming weeks and months? You know, I was a worship pastor in the same church for some 20 years, and I probably led worship for around 2,500 times. But I never led a time of lament. So I don't have any particular credibility in all of this. I have no real experience to share or finely honed wisdom to draw upon. But what I do have are some questions, partly as I reflect on my own history as a worship leader, but also partly for the church right now. Why don't we lament? Why didn't I lead lament? And firstly, I think in my whole 20 years as a worship pastor, we never had a leadership conversation about it, let alone developed a shared vision. And I guess, like a lot of these things, a leadership conversation is a good starting place. I certainly don't think worship leaders should go there alone. Secondly, I don't think we have many models to draw on. For so much else in worship, we have lots of videos and churches and conferences that we've been to. But for lament, these things seem few and far between. So the truth is, we will almost certainly need to take some risks here. Thirdly, I think lament will force us to rethink how we understand the nature of God and how he works in the world. Maybe lament forces us to acknowledge that God isn't in control as much as we like to think that he is. That's a phrase we love to use, isn't it? God is in control. But what does that mean at times like this? Fourthly, I wonder if another reason we don't lament is because it challenges us to admit that actually we don't have all the answers. So much of our leadership narrative seems to be based on having clarity. Lament means we will have to stand in front of our community and admit we don't have clarity. We don't know the outcomes. We don't have the answers. Fifthly, I think the process of lament will have to be a slow one. Everyone who suffers loss and grieves knows that the grieving process is not quick. But we don't like not quick in the church. You know, when it comes to our song worship, our standard song sets and patterns always feel the need to resolve everything within 20 minutes or 4 songs. But it seems to me that lament won't fade with a keypad at the end of our worship set. It will linger for a while. We will have to take it not quick. And finally, maybe times of lament are seen as something that is incompatible with our missional aspirations. Maybe we think that if people come to church for the first time and find us lamenting, it will put them off. But maybe we need to challenge this view. Maybe being real and vulnerable could be the most missional thing we do right now. So I think not just for the sake of our church, but for the sake of our community, lament will be an important part of healing for many people, an important part of processing grief, and therefore a way we become much healthier as communities. In fact, maybe the biggest risk we could take right now is to not lament. Of course, we may not be able to sing songs together at the moment, but we could find songs we could play. Or maybe ask those who play instruments such as violins and cello, which are so often lost in the intensity of worship days, we could ask them to write pieces of music that help us lament. Maybe we should read some of the Psalms of lament. Take our time. Don't rush through them. Return to them often. But whatever way you find, I believe that lament will not only be part of the way we grow healthier as the church, but a way we gift our wider communities that we are part of, as we all process this time of shared acute grieving. And I'm going to finish this video with some lyrics from a song by Andy Squires called What Nobody Should Know. And it goes like this. We were in a church, but we were shouting, mourning our loss, but not our doubting, wondering why love is allowing all of us to hit the floor. Down here is one of the strangest places, nothing but hearts and dirty faces. Maybe this is where amazing grace is. God knows we need some more.